All very welcome to the first Policy and Resources Committee meeting of the new mandate. And firstly, can I just congratulate you all on getting returned to the council, and I want to wish you well for the time ahead and for your time in Policy and Resources. Just for this year, as chair, the way I like to do business is just maybe the agenda has been published now for a couple of days, so we'll presume that the papers have all been read and analysed, and that any technical queries have been sent to the relevant officer. And in terms of any other urgent and relevant business, you'd have seen the email coming out from Democratic Services there yesterday, where it should be emailed to myself before 6 p.m. on the day of the PNR meeting. So that's that. So into the agenda proper. Is there any apologies? Councillor Warrington.
Just Councillor Ovens is running a wee bit late.
Okay, thank you. Have we any other apologies? No. Not happy enough. Okay. So item 2 was to sign the minutes and the confidential minutes of the previous meetings held on the 15th of March. That's just been done. Item 3, declarations of interest. Just for myself, I want to provisionally declare an interest in 7.3 and it's item 2.3. If any discussion begins around that point, I'll leave the chamber at that stage. Any other declarations of interest? Councillor Mahan.
Thank you, Chair. Item 7.3 as well.
7.3. Councillor Warrington.
Yeah, item 12.1, the confidential staff matters. There's a family member mentioned in those. So,
okay. And Councillor Donnelly.
12.1, paper J, same as Victor there. Family member mentioned within.
Okay, thank you. And Chief Executive as well.
Thank you, Chair. Just confidential staff matters, item 2.1, 3.7 and 3.10, please.
Thank you, Alison. Councillor Coyle.
7.3.
7.3. Any other declarations of interest? No. So moving on then, folks, to section 4, and it's matters arising from the meeting of the 15th of March, and we'll go through it page by page. So page 1, 2, page 3, 4, 5, page 6, 7, 8, 9, page 10, 11, page 11, boy.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Department for Infrastructure, DFA Roads Annual Report. You know, councillors are contacted regularly by constituents about roads matters. So I'm just wondering, you know, for the benefit of everybody, what is the procedure through the year, you know, variously, engagement with DFA roads? You know, what form does that take nowadays, and when do they happen? Like, when would be the first opportunity for, you know, councillors to meet DFA roads people? It's on page 11 there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Certainly, Chair. Traditionally, how we have worked would be 2 formal meetings a year, special council meetings at which DFI would present the reports. We do provisionally have a date for October for that, as they indicated. That will be the earliest by when their budgets and associated matters will be confirmed. And those meetings, Chair, would be preceded by a series of DEA meetings, which road service officials would attend. We also have in the past tried to encourage members to log or record any matters directly relating to roads maintenance or other issues and send them directly through to DFI. That's their preferred method of engagement, Chair, that they can keep on top of that, and we can certainly email those details out to members again. We will confirm the date as soon as we have the formal confirmation for DFI, but members may recall that last year we had to defer that meeting a couple of times pending their budget uncertainty.
Thank you, Alison. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chair. Just when you say that's their normal form of engagement, I think that's maybe being too polite to them. You log something on their system and you get 0 engagement back, even if the problem that you logged, pothole or whatever, disappears from the system in a week or 2 weeks or a month afterwards, but the pothole or the defect isn't fixed. there's no engagement, there's no explanation of why it was removed from the system. There is nothing. And it is almost impossible, and I'll say this to the new councillors, it is almost impossible to get any reply from any of Road Service. I'll add the proviso, maybe it's just me that they don't reply to, but I get no replies from them unless I almost go down and sit outside the door. So engagement with Road Services at the minute is almost zero.
Thanks, Seamus. Councillor Donnelly?
Chair, it's just a brief point that I found actually that there's a new system that for uploading problems with potholes or gullies or manhole covers, whatever, that you can actually report it and put it on the map on DFI's website, similar to you can with a street light.
Yeah.
And a member of the public can do the same. It's very, very good, and do you get responses from it? So I find it excellent. So I think it's something maybe we should consider even putting a link from our website to that so that the public could access that very easily, and you can upload photographs and so on off the potholes as well. I think it's very good.
Yeah, that's a good proposal. Maybe just to get a second
Happy
just
to
to
propose
formalise
that.
that. And Councillor Michael Duff. Seamus?
Thanks, Stephen, for letting me. I have been uploading onto that for I don't know how long it's on the go that, but that's the format I use, and I never get a response back, and it falls off the system without being fixed. That's the system I'm talking about.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Green. Okay, so that was items are raised, matters are raised on page 11. So page 12, 13, 14, 13. Councillor Green?
So 14.
14, go ahead.
It was just in relation to the Cuban doctors, 10.3. Any update or anything in relation to that? Because as I said before, there was a large expectation that there was a number of doctors coming through this format, and I wouldn't like anyone to accuse us at a later stage then of not pursuing this. So I'm anxious that it's kept on the agenda and that we do get regular updates on that, or of how it is actually going.
Do you want to add anything there?
Well, just to comment, and I think, Chair, maybe Councillor Green was able to participate on the video call with the Cuban embassy representatives and the Trust. Where matters were left was the Trust's head of international recruitment participated, shared the information about how any foreign nationals would engage with health recruitment. That information was shared with the Cuban embassy, who indicated their willingness to remain involved and engaged. We've heard nothing further from either party since.
Okay, thank you, Alison. Okay, that matters are raised and dealt with. Item 5, can I get a proposal and seconder, please, to endorse the terms of reference for this committee? Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Green.
Yeah, I'll second that. But just on the previous point from Alison, could I request that we do follow that up and just write to both them parties to see what has there been any follow up from that meeting?
Be a seconder. Councillor Debbie Coyle. Okay. We moved in then into the Corporate Services and Governance Director reports. And Catherine's going to take us through 6.1. It is a fairly substantial document there, 10 pages on the annual governance statement. So we're not going to go through it all, obviously. So Catherine will highlight some main points and then we go to the recommendation. So go ahead, Catherine.
Thank you, Chair and members. As the Chair has previously explained, there is a cover report and a fairly detailed annual governance statement. Just noting, members, on the cover report that it's a requirement for this council to be responsible for ensuring that its business is conducted in accordance with law and proper standards. Council also has a duty to make arrangements for continuous improvement and refer to the legislation that duty is linked to. Discharging overall responsibilities, Council must put in place proper arrangements of the governance of its affairs, and the appendix is the summary prepared by senior management team and heads of service in relation to the arrangements existing within the council for those governance arrangements. Linking through, members, just advising that the appendix is based on a template that is used by all NI councils in relation to developing the good governance and linked through to the local government accounts and audit regulation. So it's a legislative requirement to have this in place. In terms of the cases for decisions, members, you'll note there on item 2.3 the significant elements of the systems and processes that comprise the governance arrangements. So they're detailed there across a number of particular areas across the council. And noting at 2.4 the requirement to conduct a review at least annually of the effectiveness of its governance arrangements, which is the review that's taken place in the formation of the annual governance statement, which is presented to yourselves this evening. Noting also, and linking back through to the council's head of internal audit, and a report on the effectiveness of the internal audit was provided through to the audit panel, the minutes of which are provided through to this committee of the council on the 21st of March. And the internal audit opinion, members, is based on the systems reviewed and reported on in each particular year. There are a number of significant governance issues, members. Those governance issues are by and large the same as in the previous year's annual governance statement, linked to financial uncertainties and resilience, cyber security and digital services, legal issues and climate change and sustainability, and the final matter there in relation to industrial relations. The council is also required to identify steps that will be taken to minimise the impact of those significant risks, and subject to approval, the annual governance statement is included within the annual statement of accounts, which we're currently working through and referencing that will be in the next agenda item. So members, subject to any queries, the recommendation is that the council approves the annual governance statement for the year end at 31st of March 2023, and that this committee gives approval to the chairperson of the Policy and Resources Committee to sign the annual governance statement. That will also be signed by Alison as Chief Financial Officer of the council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay, members, there's nobody indicating, so can I just take a proposer and seconder, please, for that report? Councillor Debbie Coyle and Councillor Dermot Brown. Thank you. All agreed, all happy. Okay, so moving on to 6.2, and that's the consideration of the draft financial position for the year end 31st of March, and that's Catherine again.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The members, this report is appended by 4 detailed documents, and just by way of setting the scene, the council approved estimates of income and expenditure back in February 2022, and then during the year, the impact of external cost pressures, inflationary pressures, required the council to review its estimates of both income and expenditure for day-to-day, so that's the revenue, income and expenditure, and its capital plan. During the, I think it was October, November time when members actually approved those revised plans, and I suppose there was a reduced capital plan in terms of the number of projects, albeit that the funding of that capital plan remained as was approved by the council at the early part of the year. The revenue estimates for 22-23, the initial revenue budget was 41.7 million, and it was revised, and it really focused on the delivery of core and statutory services and reducing discretionary activities proportionally. You'll note, members, the impact of the cost increases on that original budget, and it was funded by and large with in-year efficiency savings and service delivery and programme cost reductions of 2.2 million and reduction on the cost of future capital plans and development. That revised income and expenditure also included £250,000 allocation to support the community and voluntary sector in relation to the cost of living crisis. There was an overall increase in net budget of 2.67 million, which was funded mainly by council reserves. The draft position, members, so just by way of background, members, I did include as an appendix those revised capital estimates and the revised income and expenditure, particularly for the new members of this committee. So the draft financial position, members, is included at Appendix 3 and includes an overall surplus of £270,604, which will increase the council's general fund balance to 4.3 million. The net spend, so the net spend is expenditure less income for the year, and in the draft position is £44,403,927 against a budget of £44,694,815. This includes the cost of financing the capital expenditure. Members will note under 2.4, and it's a very good summation. I suppose we look at all the different service areas which the council operates, but by and large, the significant elements of variations from the revised budget and the actual activity for the year was very positive increase in budgeted income of 1.5 million. And members will note the detail there of that income levels, including bank interest due to increased interest rates, and income from service areas returning more or less to norm. So I suppose when we revised the revenue positions, we didn't anticipate a full return to norm of service delivery and demand. Overall net savings and staff costs, members, of 1.1 million, and generally operating costs fluctuated in small amounts, but overall in the big picture across a couple of hundred budgets, and having availed, again on a very positive note, from the savings in the electricity budgets from the NI Energy Relief Scheme, which ran up until the 31st of March. That was a significant benefit for this council. The financing of the council budget, members, as you'll be aware, is by way of central government grant, and the figure received for the year is 3.274 million, which is just slightly less than the amount in the estimated revised budget. The indicative rate income, members, is included at £38,837,636, which is £765,000 more than the estimated due. This position is advised by Land and Property Services, members, and it will not be fully confirmed until later in 2023. And it does include a significant estimation in respect of irrecoverable debt, which remains an area of significant uncertainty in relation to future rates income. In terms of the draft capital spend, members, the capital spend was 11.118 million against a revised capital programme of 15.9 million. There were delays in some projects, and other projects just haven't proceeded in line with anticipated spend on those. The detail of the estimated spend and the detail of the actual capital activity is attached at Appendix 1 and Appendix 4. Members will also note there on 2.7 the proposed allocation of funding of the capital spend. And just to note, members, there is no borrowing required in that 22-23 financing of the capital spend. At 2.8, members, just to note that the Policy and Resources Committee previously approved transfers to the capital fund, and there are two transfers included within those figures, member, in the draft position, subject to approval tonight. The first one is £765,000 to the General Contingency Reserve, and that's really in relation to supporting future uncertainty that may arise in the rate space and its ability to generate income, and a transfer from the Council's Economic Development Reserve, which was earmarked for specific expenditure within economic development. Also noting, members, that the central government just in March 2023 provided additional support to this council for hardship fund, asylum seekers and social supermarkets in an amount of 368,000, and approval is sought in line with the award of that funding through to the council's COVID Contingency and Resilience Reserve. Members will note that the draft performance for the year ended 31st of March, as I noted earlier, is a revised surplus against a revised budget of 270,000, and members will note that that is due to, in part, the use of the COVID Contingency Reserve, which was required. The final position, members, will be supported by Prudential and Treasury indicators and will be presented to the Council's Policy and Resources Committee in September 2023. These figures, members, will also be presented to next week's audit panel for further scrutiny and review, as will the actual draft financial statement of accounts, which are a significant document, and we're currently working towards the finalisation of those. Members, just to note that the draft position will reduce the Council's usable reserves from 29 million to 22.4 million. At the 31st of March 22, members, there was virtually no change in the Council's reserve position from one year to the next. So this is now showing the cost of living impact, increases in inflationary cost pressures and general cost pressures, and where we're moving forward with a capital plan that members previously approved, and we're now starting to definitely use down those reserves that had been earmarked for those particular projects. At section 3, members, is just noting that as part of the preparation of the accounts, reliance is placed on external support and particular expertise in relation to accounting for retirement benefits, for the closure and aftercare costs of the Council's landfill sites, and for the valuation of freehold properties, all of which is required to comply with Accounting Code of Practice, guidance and regulations. And members, just noting that the unaudited statement of accounts, in line with the legislation, seeks approval from Alison as Chief Financial Officer of the Council, and the required date for submission to the Northern Ireland Audit Office and to the Department for Communities is the 30th of June. The final figures will be subject to audit, which takes place over the summer months and may change, and an update will be presented in September. So, Chair, subject to any queries or comments or questions, just the recommendations are detailed on section 9 of the report, A to F. If you want me to go through those, I will in detail, but yeah.
Just pause there, maybe there,
Yeah.
Catherine. I see Councillor Robbins is looking to come in here, so go ahead there, Mark, whenever you're ready. Oh, sorry, apologies.
Sorry.
Go ahead there, Mark.
Well, thank you, Chair, and apologies for being a few minutes late
Okay.
at the start of the meeting. Chair, Chief Exec, I have a few questions and then laterally comments in this paper, if that's okay. So, first of all, in relation to the stated 270,000 underspend, am I correct in saying that this underspend would have actually been a lot higher had we not transferred the 2.1 million from reserves, or the 2.1 million back to the reserves? So the way I read it, and forgive me if I'm wrong, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but the council planned to spend 41.7 million last year, when in reality it spent 39.1. That's correct. Then secondly, the second query is, can someone explain to me the purpose and the background of the transfer of the 400,000 revenue to capital? And then it's already been touched upon in the director's report there, but in relation to the almost 750,000 additional rates that were collected this year or last year, could someone just explain to me? I know you've said it's a little bit fluid at the moment, but in terms of when did the council first become aware that that was a possibility, and how, if at all, was that factored into last year's rates discussions? Because I think that's a fairly important point of this. I'm not sure if previous members of the previous council were informed that there was a possibility of such an additional 750,000 coming forward. And then the final query really I have is, can members be issued with a written briefing on the council's reserves position? Because I mean, I've been a member in this council for a month now, and I'm still trying to get my head around where exactly we are with the reserves. I mean, whenever I look at one of these papers, I see we seem to have 5 reserves, but again, I have no idea in terms of the level of those reserves or to what purpose or what their stated purpose is. So I do think, and I've mentioned it before and I've mentioned it a couple of times, I do really think a written briefing, particularly on the reserves position, would be very useful. And then very quickly, Chair, I do have some broader or general concerns on how we as a council operate. I mean, a month in, I'm only going to list one example tonight, and that's the issue of the Enniskillen fireworks. I mean, if I recall correctly, we had an informal meeting of the council the night that was made public. But the first I heard about it was whenever a member of the public mentioned it to me, that they had read about it on Facebook. I mean, I understand that the old council in the February meeting did allocate a degree of discretion to the chief executive to make those decisions on discretionary spend and non-statutory spend. But I do have deep concerns about that. So just very, very quickly, Chair, I mean, if possible, I would like to see that power redacted in terms of as a member of this council, I feel deeply uncomfortable that there's significant decisions being taken like that outside the control or knowledge of members of this council.
Just before we begin, Catherine, we'll just say, like, you're a fairly new councillor, and there was a fair bit of discussion on work. Our colleagues here will be aware of the estimates working group and the work that went into that, and obviously the months prior to striking the rate, and in terms of the fireworks, it was heavily discussed at that particular time. But by all means, you're entitled to raise that point. Councillor Robbins, I'll just bring in Catherine just to touch on some of your comments there.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and maybe just keep me right if I'm picking up all of the queries that you had indicated. So I suppose it's really back to the fundamentals of how the council's budgets is made up, and in predominantly the budgets are looked at in terms of the income and expenditure needs and requirements of every single service area right across the council. So that becomes the budget, and it's a net spend budget. And then added to that then is a cost of financing of capital expenditure, which we include in that. And then through the estimates process and through the special council meeting, members do agree on the overall budget for the council and the movement between reserves. So there are balances that the council has in reserves. The council during 22-23 agreed a financial reserves policy for the council, so I can share that with you, and it is on our council website. And that's the determination of when and how the reserves of the council are to be used. So in relation to the detail of when we're producing a set of income and expenditure, there's a necessary need, and you will note that on the paper, that the surplus or deficit on the budget is zero. So whilst I said in my report that the net spend will include the cost of capital financing, members determine the use of reserves, whether money's been transferred to a reserve. And in this case, you will note in the revised budget, members were this council was in the position that it had actually reserves in place to meet the costs of the increase in cost pressures and inflation pressures over the past period. When all that's taken into account, that sets what the total costs are of the council to be financed by either the general grant or rates income. And that shows a net figure there of zero. So depending on what the actual transfers are compared to the estimated ones, compared with the actual net spend of the council is compared to the estimated, and compared to what the general grant and the rates income are, actual versus estimates will determine the overall position. That's the position there which defines the 270,000. In relation to the rates query, members work with ourselves as officers, and as I was advised earlier, Land and Property Services provide a significant amount of data in which informs the decision of the calculation of the rates income. So they'll provide a significant detailed document made up of a number of different factors, and I'm happy to go through that with at another alternative stage in relation to the development of the rates income. It is always like the income and expenditure of the council. The rate income is based on estimated valuations of properties in the rates base, and as members will be appreciative, every single day the rates base moves. And in answer to your query, absolutely, this council receives, and this particular committee receives, a quarterly update on where the rates position may lie in comparison to. So I've brought a number of reports through to the committee over the last 12 months on a quarterly basis to say the indication is looking like this amount this quarter or that amount that quarter. That information all feeds through from Land and Property Services, and I provide that through then to the council. So members would be aware that the indicative figure was going to be more than the amount set at the earlier juncture, and would have been provided for reasons and rationale to support that. And it's very difficult to predict that one, and there are a lot of assumptions underlying that actual calculation of the rates income, which is based on all of the domestic properties and all the non-domestic properties within the Fermanagh district area, and there are a number of exemptions and allowances, etc., which inform that figure. I've maybe briefly touched on the reserves position, and I suppose, member, just to be aware, we are currently working through, this is the draft position for management accounts. We then need to do the technical, which we're currently working on as a team, the technical, legislative, compliance, guidance, adjustments to those figures. So what we'll bring back in due course is this position, which needs to be adjusted for all the accounting and technical adjustments, and then bring it back to what the position is for the rate space. And within that, it will link back through to the actual council reserves and what they look like. For information, and I'm more than willing to provide more information, the accounts from last year are on the website, and it will provide a detailed summary of the reserves that the council has. But I appreciate more detail is provided in that. So we're working through the actual position at the 31st of March. So this is the income and expenditure. We've got to produce a balance sheet, and that's just not at that point. That's the paper that I'm referring to that needs to be completed by the 30th of June. If you can bear with us just till we get to that stage. Sure, if I've covered all the points there, Alison, if you wanted to maybe comment on anything.
We'll just encourage, before we get on, just maybe encourage Councillor Robbins and any other councillor who has detailed questions like that or needs detailed information to please contact the head of service or any officer who's more than happy to help you with that. Alison, you want to comment now? Or?
Yeah, it's just briefly, Chair, just specifically on the fireworks issues. And I suppose I know been recent media coverage, but just to confirm, I'm satisfied both in the decision for the cancellation last year, which I appreciate was short noticed. Members were fully briefed and aware. And secondly, in the context of the cancellation this year, or not proceeding with fireworks in either Omer and Enniskillen in 2023, as was alluded by you, Chair, that was considered fully as part of the estimates process and part of the members' final decision in February.
Thank you. Councillor Michael Duff.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I suppose it might be helpful if the Chief Executive or Catherine gave us a kind of an overall sense of the financial challenges facing this council at this time. You know, like heading into we're in a new council mandate now. What is the changed environment? Catherine talks about inflationary pressures, rise in energy costs, reduction in DFC rate and support grant, and I thought the council budget was maybe in the region of 45 million, but is it closer to 42 million? And then also, it has been said that as a council, we're going to have to, put some emphasis, as we have in the past, but maybe greater in the future, on levering funding from elsewhere. What does that really mean? Levering funding from where? Leveraging funding from where? So overall, what financial climate are we in this year and this 4-year term of the council?
Okay, thank you, Barry.
And maybe just summarise, Chair, thank you. So I suppose financial uncertainty is included in the significant governance issues on the previous paper. And that's the uncertainty that we're actually operating in. And yes, more than willing, and I know Alison will come on to this now just as she speaks, that those factors that you've mentioned in relation to cost, inflationary pressures, reductions in budgets, that's real. That is absolutely real. And, as I just had mentioned in my report, we are now starting to use reserves and use the reserves. And as I do say, this council is, in the position that it has good reserves. And you'll note the challenge in setting the revised budget for 22-23 included a significant transfer from the council's COVID contingency reserve. We've never had to do that in the past number of years. So that uncertainty that's out there in the private sector is there, and it's there definitely within this council. And in relation to leverage of funding, that is trying to maximise any funding opportunities that's out there from central government or further afield that will actually support particularly some of the capital plan delivery. The other element is that the central government funding is reducing, whether that be the overall general grant coming to this council or by way of direct support on service delivery. But happy to develop with Alison, yeah.
Okay. Do you want to add that, Alison?
Only just a couple of things, Chair, would add. I think we obviously saw last night in the context of the council meeting previous week, the reduction of the rate support grant, which is a very significant impact on us. And you'll have seen members from the EQIA response, which Louise has prepared, will be dealt with later in the report. The scale of the change to this council in terms of the loss of literally hundreds of thousands of pounds over a couple of years. So changing picture from central government. The reality, Thelma will be dealing later in her report, industrial relations is a very significant impact on us and will continue to cost a very significant amount of money to the council, including, I suspect, within this financial year. And finally, just the volatility of the wider market. While we're starting to see prices settling, there are still some uncertainties. And we saw last night in the context of the business case report that the uplifts that are required on some of the contracts to reflect those changes. So a very challenging financial environment that we're heading into.
Okay. Councillor Irvine, and then we move on to Councillor Dehan, who's joined us from WebEx. So, Councillor Irvine.
Thanks very much, Chair. Some of this I don't know now, but I'm just going to put it to Alison and Catherine. I think we'll come back. I think for new councillors, I think they require a contextualisation with regard to the financial situation the council found itself in last year, towards the middle to the end of last year, and the impact it had on in-year and the impact it is now carrying through into the second year. That's the first thing. Two, because of that, certain powers, I think, were temporarily bestowed on the Chief Executive with regard to looking at financial matters going forward. And I think that needs clarified as well, if they currently stand or get carried forward, because the fireworks situation was one of those. Well, maybe I misread that.
Might be
That must be a misunderstanding, Chair. That's completely incorrect. So there were no additional powers delegated to me, nor were any delegated.
That's a clarification in this need.
Nor were any powers assumed by
right there, Alison. I'm sorry to talk over you. That there were. So I think that needs probably put out there. Next thing is in regard to, I suppose, additional gains, particularly coming through from rate support grant or even actually the penny product, as we have seen tonight. The decisions that we as a group took and sort of relied upon you as directors with regard to where those additional monies would go. The next thing, the effect of that in regard to in-year spending, either being brought forward by officers in regard to additional work that could be carried out, or even prompted by councillors in year to carry forward, because we did take a decision in that regard, and I think that sort of needs to be clarified. Does that still stand, or do we have to revisit that? The other thing, and the last thing is, and I'm just doing it generally, there was an issue in regard to recruitment and retention taken last year. I just want clarity, and maybe we have to do this in confidential, whether that still stands or whether that actual approach has changed. And that's, I'm not looking for any further information tonight.
I think we can get some clarity on that now, Councillor Irvine. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, no, Chair, if I'm interpreting Councillor Irvine correctly in the context of the recruitment freeze and only proceeding to recruit essential posts, that remains the position.
Okay, thank you. So 2 councillors on WebEx. I'm going to take on Councillor Deehan first and then Councillor Roof. Go ahead, Josephine.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for allowing me to come in at this juncture, and thanks to Catherine and Alison for their reports and input. I'm sure all members were greatly dismayed, indeed disbelieving, at the reduction in our rate support grant, the magnitude of it, and it could not have come at a worst possible time for us and indeed for other affected councils. I just wondered, Chair, if Alison had any discussions about this reduction in the rate support grant with any of her chief executive or senior officer colleagues. Is there any pathway that we might employ in terms of lobbying or seeking to have this decision reviewed, or at least have a stay of execution on it, given the very significant financial pressures that we face going forward? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Alison, thank you.
Okay, Chair, thank you. Yes, Councillor Deehan, we have had collectively across the 7 councils who are in receipt of the rate support grant made significant representations to the Department for Communities and sought for, as you've indicated, a stay of execution or ideally the decision to be reversed. The response that we've received thus far from the Permanent Secretary is that while the concept of the rate support grant is enshrined in legislation, the quantum is not. So therefore he feels confident in the decision that has been taken thus far. We've obviously included it within our response to the EQIA, and the department has indicated that they are going to take cognizance of the findings of the EQIAs and the consultation responses before taking final decisions. So I would maybe await their judgment. But Chair, if you are content, there is a related matter that I could perhaps brief members when we get into confidential business later. Excuse me, that may provide a further course of action if members were minded to proceed.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Deehan. And Councillor Roof. Go ahead there, Councillor Roof, if you can hear us.
Apologies. So yes, I just firstly wanted to apologise for being a few minutes late. I had set up on the laptop and multiple times it crashed on me just as I went to join WebEx. I want to echo Councillor Irvine's point just about the contextualisation of the numbers. Obviously, I am a new councillor, so I don't have the background as to where that's been previously. I appreciate the current pressures. But the numbers like the general fund balance have been about 4.3 million. It risks the big number blindness that you would see with the likes of the UK government, where they'll say the NHS has got more money than ever in its history, but in reality it's a reduction. So some form of chart or graph over the past, maybe the last four years through that council term would contextualise that a lot better, and we can then kind of see. I appreciate where we are in terms of pressures, and it would give me a better idea, and certainly the other councillors a better idea of how serious or where our budgets and our surplus is starting to shrink. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll just take a final comment quickly from Councillor Evans and then we'll come back then. Just very briefly, Mark, you've been in already, so very briefly.
Thanks, Sharon. Appreciate you letting me back in. It's just really two very, very brief comments. First of all is in relation to my very first point was seeking to get an acknowledgement from the council that we are now in a significant, I appreciate the context and I appreciate we're still in very, very deep waters, but it's an acknowledgement. I'm looking for an acknowledgement that we're in a better place financially to the tune of around 2.5 million than where we thought we were going to be during the estimates process.
I don't think that's a fair statement. You know, maybe I'll just get Catherine or Alison maybe to.
But it's just going on the numbers, Chair. And then the final point is, and it's going back to the point about the decision of, I'm sorry to dwell on this point. I mean, who and when took the decision on Enniskillen fireworks? Because my understanding,
we're not going into the fireworks, Councillor Robin. That's been well discussed now in the previous
but I mean, if we can't talk about it tonight, Chair, then when can we talk about it?
I will first talk about it in detail, you know, at the time for sure. But I'll get a final comment from Alison.
This decision, or was it an officer's decision? Because the way it was presented previously was it was an officer's decision.
We'll get a final comment now from the Chief Executive and from Catherine. So go ahead, Alison.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say I'm a little bemused now, Chair, by this, to be honest, but certainly in the context of, so the decision was taken by members in relation to the pressures that Councillor Irvine has alluded to. This was in terms of the October 2022 fireworks. Okay. Subsequently, in terms of this year's fireworks, it was taken in finally in February earlier this year of the special council meeting for the adoption of the rate setting process. The council agreed that fireworks would not be included as part of that.
Is that okay?
Thank you.
And Catherine, maybe just finally.
Yeah, member. So if you want to refer to Appendix 3 and in the context of the report, the council had a revised budget of net operating expenditure of 41.7 million. That's the first line highlighted in blue. And the spend for the period for the service delivery was 39.1 million, with a surplus there on service delivery of 2.6 million. As I'd mentioned earlier then, the costs of financing the capital programme and the approved transfers to and from reserves brings that, but our surplus then down to 290,000. We then look at the movements in the general grant and then the bottom line there, which is the transfer from the COVID reserve. So this council estimated that it would utilise 3.2 million from its COVID reserve, and I suppose you would like to see a better picture, but it actually used 2.5 million from the council's COVID reserve. So that figure there almost negates out the additional rates income received. So without that COVID reserve, this council would be looking at a loss for the year, significant, just over 2 million. So are we better off? The council's general fund balance, which is its day-to-day operating expenditure balance, which generally grows every year, has increased by £270,000. And then I referred to on terms of the council's reserves, which officers are currently working on. So the council's reserves are moving down, having funded the council's capital spend and having funded the actual income and expenditure. So the council isn't better off by over 2 million. It is marginally better off in terms of that surplus to the general fund, but the overall usable reserves of the council, and I appreciate members need some training which will be done through induction programmes, has reduced.
Okay.
Its overall net position. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just to reiterate the point again that yourself and your team are available for any councillor at all who wishes to discuss this further, and indeed maybe there might be some clarity maybe for new councillors, Alison maybe as well.
Yes.
Just so there's no ambiguity at all. Okay, so that takes us to the recommendations on page 6 of the report. Can I take a proposer and seconder for them, please? Councillor Debbie Coyle. A seconder, please. Councillor Thomas O'Reilly. Are we all agreed? Okay, thank you, members. So item 6.3 is our procurement and tenders report, update paper C. We have it now for a while there, folks. So if I can just take a proposer and a seconder to maybe take the recommendations in two lots there. From 9.1, there's approval, and 9.2 is noting. So if we can just take a proposer and seconder to note recommendations at 9.1. Councillor Dermot Brown.
I'm happy to propose the report there. I just have a question around social value in procurement generally. I know that there was a policy brought in through Stormont to have Stormont departments exercising social value in procurement, but how does that extend to the council? Does the council have a similar social value policy? And if it does, what does that look like? How does that manifest itself? Yeah, that's the question. Thank you.
Okay, Catherine.
Thank you, Chair. So the council has its own procurement policy, which is approved through the Policy and Resources Committee. And again, it will be provided in more detail at induction and is on the council's website at the moment. I'm happy to take any queries on that. And that policy is linked to good guidance. And if you maybe want to look at as an example, within this paper, for example, item 3.1.1, sorry, that's actually not a good example. If you move to 3.1.2, social value is assessed as an element. So when the council's procurement function is looking at the assessment criteria of a tender, there is a template issued out, and those that are willing to or wanting to actually provide a response to that. So the assessment criteria is always detailed in that paper issued out. So in that example there, the assessment criteria is 40% price and 25% quality. And then you will note methodology, programme of works, functional characteristics and environmental issues, which is part of the social value element. So all tenders, where it's appropriate to do so and where it's applicable that it can be done, which is the majority of tenders, the social value element is actually assessed as part of the assessment and before the award of a contract.
Okay, and that's all available again. There's
Absolutely, yeah.
overall policies online.
Yes, yeah.
Councillor O'Reilly.
Chair, I'm happy enough to second.
Okay.
And just while I'm second, Chair, if you give me a little latitude on procurement and so forth, I think we have maybe a good opportunity here at the start of a mandate to look at procurement of legal services. And I would propose, Chair, that we would take a look at how we procure our legal services and whether we're getting value for money, whether there is a better way to do it. I know we've all had experiences, or some members I know will have had experiences from legacy councils and outside and all of the legal services that way. So there's a number of options there to be able to avail of legal services. So.
Yeah. Okay, and Councillor Green, Seamus?
Yeah, I would want to second Thomas's proposal on that. I think we need to look at it. I suppose I think we could do better. I think the processes has been very slow, and that in our I'll say more on it, but I second Thomas's proposal.
Thank you. And then moving on, just to get a proposal and seconder just for 9.2 of them recommendations, please. That's just noting the tenders awarded within the report. Councillor Anne-Marie Donnelly and Councillor Thomas O'Reilly. And we all agreed with all that, members? Thank you. So moving on to 6.4, and I'll get Sam to take us through the staff matters, paper D.
Thank you, Chair. So, Chair, this is your normal monthly staff matters report. Sorry, there's a few more items on it than usual, just with not meeting for the last 2 months. The first item at 2.1 is a review of policies. So that's reported for approval. And then the second item for approval is the closure at Christmas, on the Christmas closure dates, as per previous year arrangements as well. Just the items for information, Chair, there's a number of items there for noting. There is an update on the annual absence report, and I know that you will notice that we still have quite a high level of sickness absence. It's lower than last year, but just to note that it is still quite high at this point in time. We don't have the full comparative information from other councils. That's not published much later in the year, but from the information that I've received informally, that would be a common enough position across the board in councils. I also distributed tonight, just for your information, I know the report gives you some detail on some of the health and wellbeing initiatives that we run through the council, and I distributed tonight to members a copy just of the health and wellbeing calendar, which includes quite a lot of useful information and signposts posting. I can give more copies if anyone wants a second copy. The annual monitoring return is summarised as well, Chair, for you there at item 3.2. And then at 3.3, you have an update just in relation to the annual contribution to NILGA, and 3.4, noting the Chief Officer's pay agreement, and then 3.5, an update just in relation to local pay. Local government pay negotiations. And I should point out, I think some of you maybe who were at the informal meeting earlier, I did mention just that we are anticipating a ballot for industrial action of our employees within the council in relation to the national pay offer. It has been rejected by the the trade unions in the National Joint Council. So then you have some technical papers from NILGOS at 3.6, 3.7, and then you have an update really in relation to the staff newsletter and the Local Government Staff Commission e-zine. So, Chair, in that report we have, we're seeking approval for the amendments to the employee support policies, the Christmas closure dates as outlined, and then for noting you have 8 items there in total as listed in the recommendations.
That's perfect. And if I can take a proposer and seconder for them reports, Councillor Warrington and Councillor Debbie Coyle. Are we all agreed? Thank you, folks. Okay, so that takes us in then to the corporate services, no it doesn't, into the Chief Executive Department reports there, 7.1, and that's revision to the Planning Committee protocol. It's really before us for approval for proposer and seconder, Alison, is that right? So you have a quick look at it, Bashir. Councillor Michael Duff's going to come into proposer to see you. Good man. Go ahead, Barry.
You're in an anticipatory mode, Chairman.
Yes.
Certainly, I salute you. But I'll propose, certainly. I was just going to say that a point I hear, and it's definitely relevant, is just to make some provision for training for councillors on planning matters, councillors who are not on the planning committee. That'll happen, I'm sure. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. A good proposal, in fact. Be a seconder for that report, please. Councillor Dermot Brown, and we all agreed. And do we require a seconder for Barry's proposal?
It's okay.
It's okay. It's all in hand. Okay, perfect. 7.2 then, Alison, paper F is to update report on nominations to council subcommittees and other bodies.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. So couple of matters firstly for decision, Chair, and the first relates to the establishment of subcommittees. So as detailed in the report and following discussion at the annual meeting, it's proposed that the Council will establish 2 subcommittees in this mandate, one for rural affairs, the other for health. Nominations to the subcommittees are again by quota greatest remainder, and following the calculations that have already, or the places already allocated in the other committees, the breakdown is provided in the report at paragraph 212. So I've received the details just prior to the meeting, Chair, of the party positions in terms of preference. So Sinn Féin have indicated preference for 6 seats on the Rural Affairs Committee, which would be then 5 on health. The Ulster Unionists, 2 positions on each. The Democratic Unionists, 1 position on Rural Affairs and 2 positions on health. SDLP would be 1 position on Rural Affairs, 1 position on health. The Alliance have indicated their preference for health, so that'll be the Health Committee then full. And I know Councillor Deehan is on the line, Chair, then if Councillor Deehan was minded to accept, Rural Affairs would be the final position. The also indicated, Chair, in the report that it would be recommended that prior to the first formal meetings of the subcommittees that we would proceed to informal meetings, really to agree the work plan, terms of reference and so on. And then the second part of the report just deals with the nominations to the other bodies and a couple of maybe minor amendments, Chair. Firstly, to confirm, we have now received formal approval from the Department of Education for the Strood Education Campus steering group, for that to move from 6 members up from 4. And at the annual meeting, we'd indicated that the Quilca Lakelands Geopark would move from 4 to 5 members, but Cavan County Council's preference is for 6 members. So there's a direct alignment with the municipal district areas, and it's proposed that that would increase to 6 members. And Sinn Féin have indicated a preference for that remaining seat, Chair. And I've also just included in the report the other meeting that we have a requirement for our nominations would be for the VEDP steering group. 2 nominations to that from Sinn Féin and the Ulster Unionist Party, and Sinn Féin have confirmed Councillor O'Reilly as their nomination to that group. And finally, in the report, Chair, just on chairing arrangements, it's not required, but it may be appropriate to think about how you would wish to chair these groupings, which are outside of the normal positions of responsibility. And in the last mandate, typically these rotated on an annual basis by party strength in most cases, and that was by agreement. So in terms of the populating of the final list, Chair, what I've indicated in the report is so long as by the 23rd of June that I would have the information from party nominating officers, we would update it accordingly, and we would have that formally adopted at the July council meeting, other than the remaining nomination from the Ulster Unionists for the VEDP, and that's really it. And if there are any views on chairing.
Okay, thank you, Alison. Councillor Warrington, Victor.
Thank you, Chair. We'll be nominating Councillor Diana Armstrong for the VEDP. Thank you.
Thank you. And I've got Councillor Deehan on WebEx.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just had one query for Alison, if I may, Chair. In our earlier discussions, Alison, I think you had indicated that there would be one choice of the subcommittees. Do I understand it? I mean, I understood from our discussions that it would be health and social care, but do I understand it that there isn't a vacancy there for me to choose, and that it would be the rural?
That's it. Sorry, Councillor Deehan. Yes, that's correct. That's correct. Your preference certainly for health was noted, but then Alliance had the same preference, and as the numbers fell, then the remaining position would be for rural affairs.
All right. Well, thank you, Chair. Well, I'd be happy to accept that, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Deehan. It's perfect. Okay, members, so can I get a proposal and seconder then, so for the recommendations listed at number 8? Councillor Michael Duff.
To propose, and just to ask a question, is the Arts Forum, has it fallen off or has it come somewhere else?
Chair, at our March meeting, we'd agreed that only those groups required for either policy making or funding requirements would continue. The Arts Forum wasn't required for either, and the functions have been largely incorporated more fully into the Regeneration and Community Committee and also the Grant Aid panel.
Okay, so it's not an oversight.
Not an oversight, no.
Thank you, and I'll propose accordingly then.
Thank you, Barry. Perfect. And Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chair. And I asked this last night too. In around the F4 and the broadband working group. I believe the answer to the broadband working group was that it was being moved to the rural affairs agenda. That possibly is a satisfactory move. I'm not sure. I wasn't on the broadband working group. I don't know what type of workload it had, but if the workload was light, I think it could sit in the rural affairs subcommittee. Okay, if the agendas used to be heavy on it, I would be a wee bit worried that they take up a lot of time in the rural affairs, and it's a vital thing that we need to keep on top of is the broadband strategy from the council. The AF4 working group, I'm not sure how it was left last night, but I think and I would propose that the council do look into getting it up and running and getting, I think Mid Ulster was mentioned as a possible partner in this, and so that we really do need to push for it to get it up and going. So just in case it wasn't reinforced last night, I wanted to reinforce it tonight.
Just taking Alison maybe now, and then Councillor Warrington after that.
No, thank you very much, Chair. I suppose just in relation to the A4 working group, and we had reported to this in the council previously. So this was a group led by Leitrim County Council. The last meeting of the group was in October 2012. Okay, Leitrim have indicated that they aren't minded to lead on it, or the establishment of a group because they're quite satisfied to continue to work informally, specifically with ICMAN. Our council had then adopted a motion around the dualling of the A4 N16 from Ballygawley through to Sligo. So this is just reference to Mid Ulster, and it was agreed that we would write to the councils along the route with a view to funding a feasibility study to argue both for the safety changes and for the economic impact of the route. We wrote to all of the councils, but the only council that responded was Mid Ulster. So it wasn't in the context of the working group, but rather by doing a feasibility study. So I would suggest, if Councillor Green was so minded, Chair, I think what we need to do is clarify the interest of the councils on the route to participation in any formal structures. But I do think, and what happened in relation to the A5N2 work that Councillor McElduff and others will be aware of, the first part back in 2007 was the establishment of the safety case, then the economic case, and we needed the feasibility for that. So I would be inclined that we refresh that request and then see where that leads us in terms of structures.
I'll just bring in Councillor Warrington for Seamus, then come back to you, all right? Go ahead, Victor.
Thanks, Chair. Well, certainly on the back of what Seamus was saying, I would be keen to move forward on that A4. It was myself who brought the motion back about 18 months ago to basically try to seek improvements and get improvements to that road. And certainly, as myself and Councillor Green are very aware of the amount of fatalities has been on in around our own area stretch, and certainly it's something that needs to be looked at. So I'm happy enough to go with the Chief Executive's. If Councillor Green is happy enough to go with the Chief Executive, I was going to second his proposal, but I'm happy enough to go with the Chief Executive's recommendation. Thank you.
All right, Seamus.
I'm just a wee bit confused around. I know what the Alison has said there, but the format around that, surely that'd be better coming through the working group and that to get that off the ground, because I would be a wee bit afraid that again, like 2012, I wasn't on that working group, but I believe that it needs to be pushed, and it needs to be pushed from the council. And I think no better people to push it than councillors that has an interest in it. I'm just afraid that if it goes to all of them things that Alison said there, that come 4 years' time, we'll still be talking, do we need a working group to push this forward? So maybe Alison could expand on the time scales of what she was talking about there and how it would then link into the working group, because I would have thought a council-led working group would have been the format to push them things that she's talking about.
Well, Chair, obviously at members' discretion, just in terms of the original working group, it met on 3 occasions: July 2008, March 2009, and January 2010, and it had an informal meeting in October 2012. There's no outputs from the group. There is nothing in terms of research, economic, or any other submissions. I suppose my point was, because reference was made last night to the success of the work on the A5, but also the similar safety perils in terms of the A4, that what started the effective cross-council working was actually an evidence base. There has been a lot of engagement between the councillors using ICMAN and others. And my suggestion would be that we first of all need to test, is there a willingness to actually fund the research that's needed to make the economic and safety case for the route. It is not too difficult to convene a working group, but as you will know, Councillor Green, from the Rural Affairs and others, if we don't actually have the evidence behind it, we're not going to get very much further. So in terms of a timescale, I was just merely proposing that we would be refreshing, writing to each of the councils now at the start of the new mandate in the Northern Ireland context, seeing as there's a desire to support work on this area. If they come back positively, great. But if they come back and say, well, it's not a strategic priority, which is what Leitrim are saying they're happy to work informally, then I think that would at least require the council to think about what's the best structure for bringing it forward.
Okay. Briefly, Seamus.
Yeah, well, I'd be happy enough with that, as long as, we got on the ball with that and we got replies and that, you know, in the fairly near future, so that we can plan a strategy then if other councils aren't willing to because as I said last night, I believe the A4 is probably one of the most deadly roads in the north, and I really do think what the A4 working group, I actually didn't realise that that's all the amount of times it met, but really it is an absolute scandal that that is the many times it met, and it didn't meet from 2012. And I know personally people that has been killed on the A4, and I think we really do need to start and push this. If nobody else is going to push it, our council need to push it.
Okay, fair enough, Ross, thank you. So we'll have a proposal for the report. I'll just get a seconder, please. Councillor Warrington, and we all agreed? All happy? I suppose just on the point that the Chief Executive made about chairing these groups, these informal groups, Alison, we're probably happy to do it by agreement. That's only my suggestion, but maybe I think a few nodding heads there. Councillor Michael Duff?
It's just on a related matter, so I
Yeah.
concluded on that point just for
Go
your own
ahead.
sake.
Yeah.
My point is, I'm looking at the various external bodies there, and the Enniskillen Bid Partnership is one of the bodies. Could I maybe take this opportunity to propose that the council explore with OMA businesses again the possibility of instituting a business investment district in OMA, where it's an inquiry, it's an exploration. Some years ago this was tried and it wasn't accepted, but there might be a different appetite on the part of some business, I'm not sure. So just to put that on the record, that I'm proposing that the council explore the viability or benefits of establishing a business investment
I think
district
Alison might want to
bid in OMA.
just come in that way.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Just to say very briefly, we could certainly check. I think we are once an area undertakes the ballot and it is rejected, as was the case in OMA, there is a period of time by which the matter cannot be reinvestigated. And I think we are still within that window, but it's subject we'll certainly see clarification as to what the timescale would be, and if Councillor McElduff is just a caveat, if we're within the timescale, we would wait. But if it's something that we can again explore, we would do so. Just that'll be all.
And Councillor Deehan briefly, and then we're going to move on. Go ahead, Josephine.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I really just wanted to speak in support of Councillor McElduff's proposal. I would love to see OMA getting a bid. I think the key to unlocking this is for the business community to see that it can bring significant benefits to their businesses. But Chair, I'll second Councillor McElduff's proposal pending Alison's clarification on when this consultation process can be started again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we get a seconder for that report? I think we did we? Yes. Okay, so we're all happy enough, we're all agreed. Okay, and then moving on again, Alison's going to take us through her miscellaneous report, paper G.
Yes, Chair, a few items here just briefly. The proposed forward schedule of the council and committee meetings, essentially these would follow the normal pattern, except just for July it would propose that we would meet on the Monday for the council meeting, so it's the 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th, and then planning as normal, and the council meeting at the end of July on Tuesday the 25th. And then the January cycle would also change slightly, and they would be in line with what we've done in the previous mandate. I've indicated in the report we did have a number of informal meetings agreed by the outgoing council, which we were unable to schedule because of the pre-election sensitivity period. So it would be proposed, Chair, that we will just proceed to issue those. It's for the benefit really of newer members to advise. They're fully virtual meetings, they're non-decision making in nature, and attendance is entirely at your own discretion. Paragraph 2.3 sets out the special responsibility allowances. The council had previously agreed the positions that would attract these allowances, and paragraph 233 of the report gives the detailed breakdown of each of those. The NILGA Regional Induction Programme is detailed in paragraph 2.4. There would be a cost of £1,100 for participation in all cases. There is an online option as well, Chair, for those, though we would request to have the formal details of nominations to record as an approved duty. And finally, the Somme Association subscription. And while we have made the appropriate financial provision, Chair, it's somewhat caveated in that our own members on the association have indicated there hasn't been a meeting for some considerable time and communications have been difficult. So we'll just try and clarify the current activities and meetings of the association, and subject to that being satisfactory, we would proceed to the payment.
Thank you, Alison. Can I give a proposal and seconder for that, please? Councillor Dermot Brown and Councillor Anne-Marie Donnelly. And are we all agreed? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so that takes us into section 8, and 8.1 is the consultations report, paper H. We've got Louise here to answer any questions that we have, that you may have on this report, but in the absence of any questions, you know, you have it for a couple of days now. I'm happy to take any proposals and seconders to note the recommendations on 8, 1, 2 and 3. Councillor Green?
Yeah, it's just 2.3, and I realise we're too late on this one, consultation on wildfires. I must have missed it when it came out originally to suggest that we should have made a reply on that, because it is a big problem in our council area in certain areas, and my view on the major problems of the wildfires is that Forest Service don't maintain their fire breaks. In fact, they do nothing to stop wildfires. So it's just a pity it's so close. But I'll propose the.
Thanks, Councillor Green. Thanks, Seamus. Councillor Irvine?
Sorry, if there's any further discussion in regard to that consultation, I have to declare an interest as a member of the Northern Ireland Fire and Rescue Service.
Okay, I think we're kind of moved on from that, I think. Okay, we have a seconder for the report then, so please. Councillor Irvine, that's great, and we're all agreed. All right.
On consultations, you know, the way not every councillor understands, you know, the process or the work stream that this is for the council. You know, Louise would be available to speak to councillors if they wanted to check on the status of consultations or that type of thing. You know, like there's a lot of interest, for example, in Sure Start, and whether or not Sure Start is moving towards universal provision, or what is the criteria. You know, when or where would it be appropriate for a councillor to raise that question? You know, is that the type of work area that we are familiar with?
Respond to that, maybe. Go ahead, Louise. Sorry, I'll fit on here. That's it.
Yeah. So obviously there's a whole range of consultations that come out, and we prioritize consultations that have an impact on the residents of the district or the responsibilities of the council. So in relation to consultations that are to do with crime and justice, we refer and work with colleagues from the PCSP. And if there's a technical area, such as the one on wildfires, we refer that to colleagues in other directorates, and myself and my colleagues would work with them on producing a response. And obviously it depends on the technical nature of that consultation. Now, a number of consultations are really cross-cutting. For example, childcare and early years, or agriculture policy. So we would aim to lead on producing a response to that, but we may, and we would look for member approval to do so. And just going back to the crime and justice one, we probably wouldn't have done a response to the minimum age of criminal responsibility, but a member requested, and it was a
So it's member led.
yeah, so it is member led, but there's a process where, you know, we sort of sift through the consultations because there are so many, and there can suddenly be a large volume of them at a certain time. So it's a bit about managing resources, but they are most certainly member led. So
happy enough, way? Yeah, okay, so that's proposed by Councillor Irvine. Can I get a second for that report, please? Oh, this second. Oh, sorry, apologies. seconded by Councillor Irving. All agreed. Okay, dokes. So we're moving on then to 8.2, and it's to note the report on the Rural Needs Annual Management Report. And again, members, if there's any questions, we can take them, and if not, we can move on to proposer and seconder. That report, please. Proposed by Councillor Brown and seconded by Councillor Emery Donnelly. Yeah, you there, Emery? You. So correspondence 9, there's one item of correspondence, Alison, is that right?
That's correct, Chair. It's just from the Northern Ireland Public Sector Services Ombudsman advising of the model complaints procedure now moving to a 2-stage process. The council currently has a 3-stage process, and both Louise and myself have been involved in this work. So it's just for information. There will be different reporting requirements as part of this, and we'll be bringing those to the council in due course.
Okay, can we get a proposal and second to note that, please? Councillor Irvine and Councillor Coyle, Debbie Coyle. All agreed. And a proposal and seconder now to go into committee, please. Councillor Emery Donnelly and Councillor Debbie Coyle. Pause for a wee second, just.
Yeah, so just if you just.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
Do that.
Even AOB, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Just do your report.
Yeah. Okay, Adam, thank you. So we're back online, members. So if we can just get the Chief Executive to summarise what happened there in confidential matters, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. While in confidential business, Council considered the matters arising of the Policy and Resources Committee meeting held on the 15th of March. There were no matters arising and received, they were considered the report on confidential staff matters, agreed or a recommendation on the course of action and noted other aspects, and also agreed a course of action on an unrelated legal matter.
And a proposer and seconder, please, for that report. Councillor Debbie Coyle and Councillor Anne-Marie Donnelly. Okay, thank you. Any other urgent relevant business? Apologies for missing that before confidential. That's my fault. So go ahead, Councillor Michael Duff. Sorry.
Thanks, Chair. And I got inside the timetable. I think I wrote to you at about 10 to 5 or something this evening. Just got it in time. You know, a request for a URB. The matter I want to raise is today in Omagh, it was the case that the parking app wasn't working, you know, for off-street car parking in a particular car park location, as I understand it. This is what has been said to me. So the parking app wasn't working this morning, and before 9 a.m, at least 5 to 6 cars were served with tickets and parking tickets, parking enforcement tickets. And one of the businesses said to me, by the time one of our staff members came in for change, went back out to get the ticket was already put on the car. And the staff member explained that what had happened with regard to the app not functioning, and still the ticket was put on the car. And this happens regularly, this type of thing. I'm getting serious complaints from businesses and people in Omagh about overzealous application of parking enforcement in car parks. It's to such an extent I can't ignore it. You know, I can't ignore what has been said to me, and I have to be circumspect as well, of course. But an absurd amount of tickets are being given out in the town. No hesitation, no warning, no leeway in any situation. It's not been practiced by all parking enforcement officers, but it's a serious problem. So I would ask if this council can explore exactly what is going on in Omagh with the overzealous application of parking enforcement fines.
Okay.
And I'm trying to be as circumspect and not point in particular directions here, but it's serious.
Okay.
It's serious. I've loads of examples of, you know, people for 10 seconds, you know, delivery people.
Yeah.
It's very, very inflexible. It's very, very harsh the way it's been applied, and maybe get a special inquiry into what happened today with the non-functioning or malfunctioning of a parking app, and how before 9 a.m. then 5 to 6 tickets were served in one location.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Linked to the non-functioning of the app. People trying to get change when they were trying to function with the app.
No, it's big.
Thank you.
Big stuff.
Thank you, Chair.
Very Councillor Duff, yeah. Do I get a seconder for that proposal from Barry, please? Councillor Debbie Coyle. Okay, members, I think that brings our meeting to a conclusion, Alison. Am I right? Okay, so that's us, folks, wrapped up. Thanks for all coming down, and wish you all a safe home. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alison.